Yeah, while there are many different types of zoning, there's also classifications. So I would know the ag, the residential, the commercial, those are your basic ones. But you do have more than just dictation of what you can do. Like I said, you got incentive zoning. Historical houses are usually an aesthetic zoning. Got to have a certain look, got to have a certain feel, because we want that. The one I mentioned earlier is wood replaced. They want that cottage home kind of feel. A friend of mine tried to replace a roof, and before they would allow her to give her the building permit, they specifically made sure to tell her, you understand you cannot put a 3-tab asphalt shingle roof back. It has to be the slate roof that goes back on, because that's our zoning. We want that look of the cottage feel. So zoning is not just telling you what you can and can't do, it also tells you how it looks. We have bulk zoning, how many people. There's setback, there's height zoning. For example, anything within 3 miles of an airport can't be more than like 30 feet above grade because of the airplanes. That's FAA rules, or FFA. No, that's the farmers.
That's future farmers
Yeah,
of America.
Oh, FAA, that's the airplane one. Yeah. Now, don't try and ever argue the constitutional issues. There have been many, many little stupid lawsuits, and they lose every time. I know it's your land, and you have the right to do with it what you want, but the government is ultimately going to tell you what to do for the safety and welfare of others. It comes to us, the 14th Amendment gives what they call any person has life, liberty. If they take your property, they have to give you compensation. And we did talk about inverse condemnation, right? Mm-hmm. Get the power, you get the, all right. But the Enabling Acts, which is the Fifth Amendment, gives the power to from the states down to the municipalities to create this. I would know the word Enabling Acts.
You would know the word what?
Enabling Acts, which is actually 2 words. The Enabling Acts give the municipality, the state. So what I'm telling you is there is no state zoning. Every zoning is independent of each municipality. That is handed down from the state to the local community through the Enabling Acts. It's somewhere in there. Somewhere.
Enabling Acts on 388.
388.
388. Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Page 388. Just know that that is the power that they enforce to push down that responsibility. So, slight difference. Let me give you a good example just so that you understand. I used to be into haunted houses, and we had a commercial grade haunted house years ago. One county said that that was an amusement park and made it a C4. Another county that we looked at said, oh, that's a C3. So it kind of, so I couldn't go in strip centers in Indianapolis because that's a C4 and I needed C3, or the other way around.
What's C3?
I don't know.
I think C3 like when you're going through Cumberland off that main road, or
Yeah.
in Greenfield off 9.
C1's drive-up office, like a small doctor's or an accounting. I think this is C1 here, drive up. You just, the more, the higher you get, the more it is. Okay?
You talking about joint tenancy again?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking
Are you
pit.
All right.
getting your pit together?
So the zoning permits are what monitors the compliance of a person's zoning. And there are several different permits that you can ask for or seek out if you need something to change. Before you can actually get a zoning permit, you have to go in front of the Board of Appeals or the zoning board and ask for something. If it's not, I mean, if you're building a house in an ag or a residential, then yeah, sure. But I want to do something different, I have to appeal to the zoning board and say, I want to change. And there are several different types that we can get. The first one I want to talk about is what's called a non-conforming use. A non-conforming use is something that doesn't fit, but it was there first. All right, let me give you the best example. We talked about the other chapter the other day, those houses on 31, and I said the ones on the west side of the road, are they houses or office buildings? And we couldn't really determine. I will tell you that it's actually zoned commercial. So they are zoned office for office use, C1, C2. There is a lady that still lives there as her personal residence. She has a non-conforming use. Because what they did is they went in and said, okay, we are taking all of this strip of land right along the street and changing the zoning. But you already live here, so we'll let you stay as a house, even though you're living now in a commercially zoned property. That is a non-conforming use.
Is that grandfathered in or something?
Exactly. It's the grandfathered in rule. That house looks like it's out of place. Based on use. I mean, they all look like houses, but based on the use, you go down the road and you're like, okay, dentist office, accountant, real estate agent, person living in their house, so-and-so, so-and-so. That one looks like they're wrong. The reality is they're the right one. Everybody else changed around them, and they have been given this thing called a non-conforming use because living in a commercial area is not allowed. But because she was still there, you can't throw her out and burn her house down and get rid of her, and not anymore anyway. No, you never could.
Yeah.
So they're granted a non-conforming use. It is a grandfathered clause. That non-conforming use is valid forever as long as one of two things don't happen. If she sells the property to someone who is actually going to use it as the commercial spot, she loses the non-conforming use. So if some doctor comes in and goes, hey, I'll buy your house, I'm going to use it as a small medical office, so she sells it to him as a medical office, then that non-conforming use is gone. It can't ever go back. Or if the house ever gets destroyed by an act of God and she fails to rebuild it.
And could she sell it as
She
a
can sell it
house?
as a house to someone else who comes in, but probably no one wants to buy it. Her best bet is if she ever decides to sell it, she's going to go find some other little small mom and pop that wants that little office space on that main. And once she sells it to them and they start using it as commercial, which is what it would be zoned for, that non-conforming use is now gone forever. All right. So what you have got is a row of houses where this one person looks like they're out of sync with everybody, but because they were there first, they're granted a non-conforming use.
So her house, when she lists her house, it's automatically commercial.
No.
No, not necessarily.
No.
So it's listed, it's still zoned residential, but the person
No, it's
buying
not. It's zoned commercial with a non-conforming use, which allows her to live in it.
Yeah.
Because you can't live in a commercially zoned spot.
So when she's selling it,
Is she selling it to another person that wants to use it as a residence? They can exercise the non-conforming use. But if she ever sells it outside of the residential use, that non-conforming is gone.
okay, gotcha.
So she couldn't sell it to a doctor and then a doctor sell it back to a house, and that, because that non-conforming is gone once it's used properly for that zoning. All right? So it literally is zoned commercial, but she's living there. Now, the other side of that coin, let's go the other way. Now you have a person that's living in a residential area that wants to do business in their house. They have to seek a variance or a conditional use. Probably conditional use is the one I want to talk about the most. A conditional use is where it's still the same zoning, but I want the permission to do something special, like I'm going to turn my garage into cutting hair. It's just going to be me. I'm going to put a chair in there and a sink, and that customers come to my house, and I'll use my garage as a barber shop. You would have to go in front of the zoning board or the Board of Appeals or a hearing board and ask for a conditional use specific to that activity. And you have to show reasons why I want it, you know. So now what you've got is a person that looks different, but they truly are the one that sought out being different. I want a dog grooming parlor in my garage. I told you that person that was in my rental did that. If they'd have went through the proper channels, they could have potentially got a conditional use to do dog grooming in the garage. Now, I would have never okayed it because as the property owner, I would have had to go through not my tenant. All right? The other thing is, it's specific. So if I'm granted a conditional use to say, cut hair, I can't all of a sudden go, well, you know, I could cut hair on dogs and call it a dog grooming. No, that's not the use you sought out. You would have to go back and get a second conditional use. Most common one are houses of worship. I want to turn this house into a church. Which, by the way, you never get denied on those, because nobody ever wants to say no to a church. Because all of a sudden you get bashed on Facebook for 20 years.
You have to pay for those?
Yes.
Yes.
I thought so.
You also, there's all kinds, when you do stuff like this, you actually have to go in front of the board. But this is the one court case where you have to tell other people that you're going to do it, and they get to come and yell at you.
Mm-hmm.
It's called remonstration. So in other words, and there's rules, and I can't remember, it's every property that touches you.
Don't you have to
Plus-
have permission from the properties that are around you too?
Well, that's what we're talking
Okay.
about. Every property that touches you, you don't have to get permission. You have to plead your case to the board,
And then they get.
and they make a decision. So it's highly possible that every neighbor around you could say no, and you still get it. You don't have to have their permission. They just get a chance to explain why they don't think you should get that rule, all right?
And then the board decides.
And then the board's the one that gives you the permission.
Yeah, like my garage.
Yeah.
The guy behind us got pissed off because it blocked his view.
Yeah,
It was his view of my house.
yeah. So you went through that whole process. And it's like every property within 600 feet too. It's every property that touches you, and I don't know the rules, not a
Whether or not
practicing
you have
attorney,
to-
but seek this out if you want to do this. So like every property that touches yours, plus everything that's within 600 feet or something like that, you have to send them certified mail, plus you have to put it in the newspaper, plus you have to do all this.
Have that
And
big
says, hey,
orange
I'm
sign
seeking
in
a
your
condition.
house?
Do what?
Big orange sign in front of your house says hearing.
Yeah, you gotta
Yeah,
do all of that, so that when you go down there and say, I wanna build this garage, or I wanna change, and then your neighbor can go, no, I don't want a dog grooming parlor, because there's gonna be 17 cars, and it's gonna block my driveway, and the commission's gonna go, sorry, that's not a good enough reason, they'll still give the permit.
Yeah.
Or they could say, yeah, you're right. So, it's not like they're just seeking input from the neighbors, and then they make a decision. One of the biggest ones that I remember was, there's a thing called Southern Nights, which was an adult bookstore, which sits in the parking lot of Lafayette Square. Well,
Lafayette Square.
yeah, just south of Lafayette Square. Doesn't matter. Point is, everybody went in and said, we don't want this element, yada, yada, yada. The zoning board says it is a legal business. It's a valid, they've got all their permits, and they went ahead and granted the permit, even though that people didn't like the concept, you know. Just the fact that you maybe don't believe in adult bookstores is not enough to stop that person, because it is a legal business. All right? So that's a conditional use. You could also seek out this thing called a variance. A variance is not really where you're changing the use, but you just want to vary or alter a standard that's in place. A good example is in Marion County, we have what they call setback standards, setback zoning. You set back from the road so many feet, that way if the city ever decides to widen the road or add a sidewalk, they're not going to tell your house to do it, all right? And I think in the front, it's 25 feet, maybe 15 feet, something like that. But let's say you want to build a garage, and it's going to go close to the property line, you would go in front of the board and say, hey, I want to vary that 10-foot setback to 6 foot so I can build this new garage because I'm a car collector and I have a 27-car garage. And they say, okay, you just can't do that.
You're altering what?
You're altering a standard, you're varying a standard that's in place. I'm not removing it, I'm not changing anything, I just want to vary something that's in place. Most common one is a setback standard. Or I've got a sloping front yard and I want to build something, so I have to vary the setback standard. So you've got non-conforming, you're different, but everybody changed around you, which makes you look different. you get a non-conforming. In a conditional use, you're different, but that person sought out the being different. So that's one of the things that you can think of it looking like. In both cases, there's one house that looks different from all the others. One of them, everybody else changed, and one of them, just that one guy changed.